Hi, good day. Welcome to another episode, another week of the Wild Ways podcast. I'm your host, Lyman Miller. So it's been another week of outdoor life for me, and again, I think it's a great move, except that I've had some hard challenges. If you listen to my last podcast, I explained some of the learning curves and mistakes I made from starting last year, not really being planned out properly, but I'll just give you a quick update on the trapping, and then I'll explain a couple things you got to navigate through here in Canada in the outdoor world. So we had this weird January thaw where it went up to plus 5 and 6 degrees Celsius and just melted the snow like crazy. That caused a lot of problems for some trappers out there in terms of their traps and their sets and things melting and their snares. So I know a few guys that have pulled some of their traps, kind of getting late in the year anyways. The Marten numbers, according to the trapper meeting here and a guy I was talking to in Saskatchewan, the Marten numbers are down this year, but the price is really good. And an XXL Marten at the Thompson Fur Table, they were averaging $150. So that's good. If you caught some, you look to be in good shape for that. Wolves around here were pretty strong amongst the guys I know. I know of at least 14 wolves that have been caught so far just around here. So that'll be good for the ungulates, good for the moose and elk and deer. So it was good to see. So as I go full time, I'll just explain it's different, and this isn't politics. I'm not really bashing one government or the other, but this is a couple of the things that we deal with here in BC when it comes to trapping. One of the things that the guys that have trapped forever, a lot of them have full on hatred toward forestry companies and the government, and part of that reason is we're a logging based province. A tremendous amount of jobs and revenue and wealth came into this province due to the logging industry. They never consulted trappers, so like a guy that would use his trap line would go out there and his trapping area would be completely logged and would ruin it for him. There was a time where they tried to consult with the trappers a bit, and none of that ever worked. They went ahead and did what they wanted to, regardless of what the trapper thought. So it created a lot of animosity between basically the government and the trappers. It's not the logging contractor's fault. They get hired to do a job. They go out there and they log trees and haul them to town. And so you can't really blame them. They took some, certainly would have taken some heat from trappers, but it basically boils down to the forestry companies that the logging contractors work for and the government. And the forestry companies were right in bed with the government over the last 50 years basically, and depleted a lot of the forests around here. And again, I'm not pointing fingers, but we also had a pine beetle epidemic like 25 years ago in this province, and it started in a provincial park. And I personally know that one of the guys that was in on that all those years ago trying to locate it, and they were trying to look at where it was started, and they found it, and it was about a 5 kilometer wide by 17 kilometer long section of mountain pine beetle that was starting to gain some traction. And government at that time said, no, you can't touch it. You can't touch it because it's in a park. And there was a lot of talk back then, and there's a lot of talk today from the guys that were involved in that, is that somebody should have just lit a match in there and toasted that little section of forest. But the ensuing fallout from that was the mountain pine beetle just swept across north central and northern BC, and it just absolutely annihilated the mountain pine beetle. And once it got out of the park, a lot of those forests that had been poorly managed by the government and the forestry companies, they had already been logged and replanted with just pine trees. It was like a monoculture forest. It didn't make any sense, but it was made the most money for the government and the forestry companies. So when the mountain pine beetle whipped through, it wasn't a multi-species forest. It was a monoculture of pine, and it killed them all. And at that point, what you got to do is you got to try to log those trees. They're good for they're like 10 or 15 years, I think they're still good for after they're dead, the pine tree anyways. And so there was an extensive uptick in logging for many, many years, and they sure couldn't get all of it. And after so much time, the forests are basically, the trees split, and then they're dead standing or they fall over. And it's funny because for like the last, other than this year, really for many, many years, we've had these devastating forest fires. If you look at what happened in Jasper National Park, that was a result of the mountain pine beetle. A lot of it was a result of the mountain pine beetle, plus, a hot summer and stuff, and they didn't mitigate the fact that it was going to burn. I think there was a lot of work that could have been done to lower the devastation there. But I know across where I live in the northern part of this province, we've been hammered with forest fires, which has put a lot more pressure on the trappers too, and the forestry companies, because then you're kind of all scrapping over the same available timber that's left, and you got to leave some for the animals. And so it just created this storm of I mean, you're seeing the results. The forestry's leaving this province, and that, again, you can't blame them. Our government's pretty buckled down with the cost of it now. It doesn't make any sense when these companies are moving out like crazy. They're going down into the US and starting up down there, but they've left a pretty good trail of destruction here that's going to take more than my lifetime, if it's managed properly, to fix. I know on our trap line, it's been hammered pretty bad years ago, and there's not much left. And I mean, they had consulted us and said, we don't even want any of the stuff that's alive. Like, let us go salvage some of the stuff that burnt that's still good. So that's kind of it's the consequences of just very poor forestry management over the last 50 years in this province. So that's the first part of trappers, especially the guys that have been doing it for 50 years, and they sure had their challenges when they would go to their cabin and it would literally be logged right up to their cabin door. And that's changing now a little bit. I think it's moving in the right direction. I think forest management's come a long ways. There's a lot of people that are against glyphosate spraying and stuff like that. I'm not a big fan of it. It's certainly hard on the moose. That's a proven fact. Whether you have people in the government lobbying to say it's not, they're lying. It's certainly hard. It's any trapper, anybody that spends any time in the bush knows that glyphosate doesn't let any plants grow other than the species that it wants to grow. So going back to my full time outdoors life. So one of the things you face here is and I'm not pointing fingers. I'm pointing them more at the governments over the years. So basically, I'll lay it out like this. If you had a group of people in a room and everybody's having a good time, everybody gets along, everybody's Canadian, everybody's born here, everybody's the same age, and they're all friends. They're all hanging out in the same room, we're having a good time. What the government did is they came into that room and they basically split the room in half, and they gave one group of people in that room one set of rules, and then they gave the other group of people in that room a different set of rules. So all these guys are getting along, they're having a good time, and then all of a sudden one group, and they're all outdoors people, one group doesn't have to buy a hunting license, doesn't have to buy a species license, doesn't have to do any hunter safety training, is exempt from all bag limits in all seasons, including fishing and how you fish and gear you use to fish and hunt. That same group can go and say forage for morel mushrooms in a provincial park. And then the other group has to take hunter courses, hunter safety training, criminal record checks. They have to follow strict bag limits. They have to buy their licenses, their fishing, their saltwater, their freshwater. They have to buy their hunting license, their hunting tags here in BC for moose, elk, deer, and any big game animal like a bear. Now you got this group of people in the room and everybody's getting along, but now you got two sets of rules, one for the one side of the room and another set of rules for the other side. So after a while, there's a little bit of animosity created in this group. You know, everybody's friends, and now it's like, well, why do you get to do that? Not buy a license, and I need to buy a license. I'm a Canadian just the same as you are. We're the same age. You get to do whatever you want, and I have to follow all these rules and pay all this money for all, you know, the right to go out into the forest and hunt and fish and enjoy the outdoors. So after a while, and not only that, the rules seem to, you know, the government comes back in there and keeps dividing that room even further. And this goes on for many, many years. And again, I'm not talking politics, and I'm not talking anything other than different rules for different fools. So then the government, they mandate for the most part, the COs to give the group of people with all the rules the roughest time. And I know a lot of COs that won't even touch the other group with a 10-foot pole because it's so skewed in the fact that you can say and you can argue, but the fact is there's two sets of rules and they don't really make a lot of sense for conservation. I mean, if I'm not allowed, for example, to fish sockeye, or if my limit for sockeye is 4, for example, or none at all, and I want sockeye, I'm still buddies with the guy across the room, so I can get as many sockeye as I want, because if he's, for example, if he's allowed to fish with a net and catch hundreds of them, I can get as many as I want from my buddy across the room. And I think the government neglects to realize the fact that instead of, you know, dividing us all up, like, I don't know if it was their plan or not, but it sure seems like there's another agenda there, and it's not conservation. It seems like it's more of a division thing. But if I remain buddies with the guy across the room, I can get as many sockeye as I want. Or I'm using sockeye for an example, or I can team up with him and go shoot a moose in the middle of winter, a pregnant cow, if I felt like it. That's kind of where we're at. But what they're doing is they're dangerously close to crossing the threshold where that one regulated group on the one side of the room, there's a lot of guys in there going, this doesn't make any sense anymore. And it's not about, doesn't seem like it's about the animals. It seems like there's more of an entitlement thing happening, and that group that's being suppressed and oppressed, there's guys in that group that are just not going to participate in what the government says anymore. And that's the game that BC and Canada is playing. It's this dangerous game, and it's part of the reason why I decided to step out of this nonsense of division and different rules for different people. And to top that off, I got out, and now I follow the, you know, basically the outdoor rules. But like I said, there's people I know that are dangerously close to giving up on any sort of listening to the government in any shape, way, or form in terms of harvesting animals, or, you know, both land and water. So I think that Canada is due for an awakening. I hope that it happens. And I've said it before, I can only control what I do, and I can do the best I can for my family and step out of, you know, that room that the government's trying to divide. It sure appears that they're trying to divide us all up, and I've chosen to step away from that. And I'm friends with everybody in that room. They're friends of mine. I have friends on both sides of that room, and I understand both. I mean, if I was on a side of the room where I didn't have to basically follow the rules of the other side of the room, and I didn't need a license, I don't blame anybody on that side of the room. All the power to you. If you have a group like an authority saying that you don't need to do anything, you go and do whatever you want, I'd be all over that. and good for them. It's not that side of the room's problem, and it's not, the other side of the room's problem that they're getting pushed. But what's going to happen is you're going to see a complete letdown, and that's a shame, because if people stop buying licenses and stop participating in the rules, it's not necessarily good for animal management. It's not good for society as a whole when we have, I don't care what government it is, when we have people that basically pander to the squeakiest wheel, it's not going to work well in this country. And I hope that they correct course. Sadly, it sure doesn't seem like it's going to happen, and I wouldn't blame Alberta for becoming an independent country. They're tired of it. There's a lot of people up north here I know that are tired of it, and even I know folks from down in the city in Vancouver, and some of them are getting tired of it. It just seems like if you've been exposed to the fact that up here our vote doesn't matter anyways, so why bother voting? And that's the reality of it, is our vote doesn't count federally or provincially. It's eventually people are going to start following their own rules and not caring anymore. So that's the direction that, and not to make a negative spin on this podcast, I want to keep it really positive in terms of this outdoor life, and I want to encourage people to think for themselves and try to do what's right. But when you get pushed too far, at least stand up for yourself. And that's what I'm attempting to do, is stand for something, at least for my family and my kids. I've made the decision to stand up for what I believe in, and try to do the best I can to be a good citizen. But if the government keeps pushing and they keep trying to divide the room, I'm just going to go into my own room with those same people and become buddies and laugh, and no reason to be divided up over things. So it's interesting that as I go into the outdoor world, like it's great. It's getting outside of the matrix and the negativity of town. When you're out in the forest, I mean, I'm fortunate that I can walk 2 minutes from my house and be in the forest. I live in a pretty good spot, but I do plan on spending half of this year out in the real wilderness, up in the trapline area, and things sure reach certain clarity there when you're out there. It's certainly been healing mentally for me and physically, and you don't get doom scrolling. There's no service out there. I find that when we get out of our own heads and we get out into nature's got a way of calming you down and settling you down, and it tells you lots of things out there. And one of the things it tells me is, like, this world is like screwed up. Humans have screwed it up. Like, nature's going to carry on whether we're here or not, and once it shakes us off, if it does shake us off, it's just going to go back to how it's always been for billions of years. And seems like we've been programmed to pay attention. It's like our attention's being pulled in 1,000 different directions. Well, when you're out in the bush doing something like trapping or fishing, it just levels you right down. And that's why I love that new lifestyle. I certainly need to figure out how to make some money at it. It's been a positive thing. I've certainly got some massive learning curves and challenges ahead of me, but I'm free from the office life, basically setting myself up for a life of adventure, and hopefully I can influence my kids to do the same, and maybe they can live a life of adventure and learn from some of the mistakes that I made in the course of my lifetime, and maybe they can do good in this world and be positive influences on other people. So part of my goal of going outdoors is to, like, make a positive difference and not wake up every morning angry about what's happening all around me and what's happening to this country. I can wake up and feel satisfied that I'm in control of what I can control and nothing else. And if I can be a good influence and help other people feel the same way, then I think we're in for some positive change in this country. If not, it's just we're going to keep living with the consequences of horrible decisions that have been made over the last 10 years or longer, and going 100 miles an hour toward a brick wall till it collapses, and at which point everybody's going to have to wake up. And that's another thing, is when you're out, you sure do I always use the term, you sure do get eyes to see and ears to hear. And once you step out of the doom scrolling and out of the constant distractions, it does bring a lot of clarity well, into my mind anyways. And so that's where that's at. Another thing I've really, it's been a massive learning curve, this technology stuff, and I'm going to keep pushing forward with it to the best of my ability. And I certainly hope you get something out of this. Thursdays, I do a Seeking Truth series where I've been studying the Bible too. It seems to be a great book. I used to be a book junkie and read a bunch of books as I was growing up, and loved reading, and never really read the Bible. So I've just started reading it, and it's good. So I've been putting a very short episodes out on Thursdays of Seeking Truth, and I think I'm going to keep them going on Thursdays. I was thinking of maybe moving them to Sundays. That's been a good healing and a good thing to bring clarity to my mind. I've also got the Lyman's Wild Ways YouTube channel where I kind of document some kind of my week to weeks as I move into this outdoor world. If you're interested, check that out on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description to that. I've also got my website at www.thewildways.ca. It's always a work in progress. I'm hoping to put a new product a week on there and keep everybody updated with a blog and little articles, and have that as kind of the hub for the future of the Wild Ways and Lyman's Wild Ways, to build a community there of like-minded people. So if you want to check that out, it'll be in the description as well. And I hope everybody has a great week ahead of them, and that we all make good choices and make positive change in this world. Have a great one. We will catch you next time.